Dear Agni Yogis, we shall be talking today about one of the most important subjects of Agni Yoga. How can you find your teacher? Agni Yoga insists, without a teacher, there is no progress on the spiritual path. Alone, you will not advance at all, or at least so painfully slow that you will lose the connection with the progressing evolution. It is stated clearly and unambiguously, you cannot practice Agni Yoga without a teacher. Nevertheless, there is hardly any Agni Yogi today who knows, or who at least seriously and with all his strength searches his teacher. All religions of all times teach to walk the spiritual path, the path to God, means to follow someone who is ahead of you on the same trail. It means to go on the same path on which all the great masters have walked already long before you. Only succession gives foundation to all strivings. All that exists proceeds by the law of succession. Hence, each isolation results only in the loss of that what has been ordained. On this path, you cannot go wrong. If you deviate from it, you are lost. Without something above you, you do not know where to turn and wander about aimlessly and without orientation. This is the disease of our time. Man refuses to recognize anything greater than himself and denies the hierarchy. In the dark of the night, one should look for the guiding hand. In order to put the hierarchical principle in practice in your everyday life, you have to follow the path of succession. It is a natural endeavor of every creature, not only of man, to seek someone greater than himself and to imitate him. Within each of us lives the intense longing of the human heart for someone, something, above and beyond itself, by or through which it may attain to a more perfect state. Remember your childhood. Every child has his hero. Is it not deplorable that you have lost this pure ideal? Life without heroes is no life at all. Ask all who dwell on earth if there was ever a time in which they had no heroic image before them. Every school child will acknowledge that he has always cherished in his heart a chosen ideal. Great deeds inspire the best impulses. Children will also acknowledge that although no one taught them to revere a hero, this feeling developed from within. If you wish to ascend, it is sensible for you to look up to those who have already reached the next level. The little souls follow the great ones. Thus, hierarchy turns from an abstract concept to the guideline of your earthly life. Only when our testament is applied in life can the higher step be taken. Thus we affirm hierarchy based upon the law of succession. When the cosmic law is realized, a true understanding of the chain of hierarchy is established. Thus, the one who better fulfills this law will be closer to hierarchy. The hierarchy of service is but the manifestation of the fulfillment of an even higher will. Only in this way do we affirm the law of hierarchy, and thus does cosmic law enter life. You will be able to grow only if you orientate yourself to the higher levels and follow their example. Only contact with the higher can give the direction. In approaching the great, we grow. Only there you can find true models. The visions of mastery have drawn him from the lower levels of mediocrity. The kings of spirit, where are they? Often people place themselves on the level of a king of spirit, forgetting that the most essential quality of a king of spirit is his following of a hierarch. Thus let humanity remember and ponder upon how to become true kings of spirit. Not by self-glorification do we reach the kingly step of spirit. Therefore, we advise each one to follow a hierarch. The religious doctrines of our days suffer from a grave error. They deify great teachers such as Buddha, Jesus, or Mohammed to such an extent that the faithful are scarcely able to find a living connection with them. Medievalism made an inaccessible idol of Christ and deprived him of any humanity, therefore also of divinity. Such a forced separation of Christ from human essence threatened, and still threatens, a complete break in the communion of humanity with the higher world. By propagating the dogma of Jesus Christ as the only begotten Son of God, the Church contradicts the very sense of the prayer given to us by Jesus Christ himself. Our Father, which art in heaven, and also the words of the Scriptures, so God created man in his own image. Thus, by claiming the exclusiveness of sonship and divine origin for Jesus Christ, the Church, by that very claim, forever divorced him from mankind. The masters are doing their utmost to counteract this disastrous trend. They continually descend to the material level in order to approach us humans as far as possible. Let us look at the image of a real, living God. When men began to make of Christ an inaccessible idol, there began a period of visions of Christ in most realistic forms. He appeared as very close to men, entering into their daily life. After St. Augustine, the Church began its plunge into the darkness of the Middle Ages, and Christ was locked behind a barrier of gold. In order to break it, Christ himself descended even in lesser images, in order to manifest again the grandeur of communion in unity. As an Agni yogi, however, you know all higher creatures, right up to God, were once ordinary human beings, like you and me. They lived in circumstances no better than ours today, and have risen from there. One should not conceive a great soul to be entirely distinct. Each Mahatma began his ascent from the very midst of the people, having only dared to choose the difficult path of the great soul. As the sons of God have worked their way up from the very bottom to the heights where they are dwelling today, you, as a disciple who wishes to imitate them, have no choice but to follow them on the same track. Every single one of us must climb the same rugged path that the masters have trod in loneliness, poverty, and struggle, if we would ever reach the heights on which they stand. In order to bring all substance of creation up to the point of consciousness which the creators themselves enjoyed, it was necessary that it should pass in turn through what the creators had before passed through, in other worlds, in other lives. The worship of a master alone is abstract and dead. The succession of a master is a living practice of daily life. The book of Thomas à Kempis, The Imitation of Christ, has long been appreciated in the East, not only by virtue of its content, but because of the meaning of its title. In the midst of medieval idolatry of Christ, the voice of Thomas à Kempis resounded in protest. From behind the walls of a Catholic monastery rang out a voice to clarify the image of the great teacher. The very word imitation comprises a vital action. The formula imitation of Christ is an achievement of daring, innate in the conscious spirit that accepts all responsibility of creation. Truly, the conscious disciple dares to approach the teacher in imitation. In accordance with the servile medieval consciousness, it would have been fitting to say the worship of Christ, but the ascending spirit dared to pronounce a call to imitation. What is more natural than to follow those who are a few steps ahead of us on the path? I say to you, follow me, for I cannot carry you, and I point to you the milestones along the path which I have traveled. It is of the utmost importance that you realize the whole striving, the whole success of a Mahatma consists in stimulating imitation. He has come to earth with the aim to find disciples who follow him to the heights. If he is unable to convince anyone to walk the same path, his sacrifice was in vain and his mission has failed. Wherein lies the success of a yogi? It is not in the attraction of crowds, not in the conversion of multitudes, but near the works of the yogi one can observe how others imitate him, consciously or unconsciously, voluntarily or involuntarily. People begin to do the same thing. Even his enemies, while cursing him, follow the same path. It is as if a special atmosphere had gathered about the actions of the yogi. This is a true success, when neither money nor fame, but the invisible fire kindles human hearts. Desiring to imitate him, these ignited hearts enter the yogi's atmosphere. The yogi is not a preacher. He seldom speaks to the crowds, but the works entrusted to him grow with a special bloom. Others do not even acknowledge the flourishing of these works, whose intended purpose is not to capture them, but to ignite their hearts. Jesus is a master who has shown us a path and who is walking ahead of us. He unmistakably called upon us to follow him. If any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. And he that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me. We humans distort his intentions terribly when we lift him up into heaven and cover his image with a wreath of impenetrable dogmas, instead of simply following him on the spiritual path. Every claim Jesus made for himself, he made for every other man and woman in the world, asking only that they should travel the same path he had trodden, if they would win the same station. The source of this distortion is indolence, the fatal tendency to indulge in abstract worship, rather than to redesign one's daily life in accordance with the teacher's commandments. He that saith he abideth in him ought himself also so to walk, even as he walked. To be a Christian means to become like Christ. To be a Buddhist means to turn into a Buddha. Everyone that is perfect shall be as his master, Each of you can become a disciple of Christ. You only have to follow him. The one who best and most faithfully carries out this task will become like him, and thereby renew his image on earth. Exactly like Saint Francis of Assisi did, thereby giving a shining example. The Mahatmas are watching us humans and know very well who of us is really following them, who only makes empty words, and who even opposes them. We have a list of those following a hierarch, those denying a hierarch, and those who openly oppose the Most High.